This is Nathan Fantasy Football League Updates.
And we're here with the Week 12 update of the Nathan Fantasy Football League playoff picture. And boy, what a season it's been, but it's all culminates now. We're here, looking forward to the playoffs coming as soon as we know it. And today, we will preview the path to clinch, who has the best chances, and who might have the best odds to make it to the coveted Nathan Fantasy Football League playoffs. So, with no introduction needed, it's time to talk about the playoff picture and everything that has to do with it. And what a season we've had. We've seen a division that has downright dominated the other division, and a division that doesn't really know who its champion's going to be. So, it's easy as that, folks. Let's clearly start with the current standings of the playoffs. So, taking a look at our current standings, we can see a lot of things here. We can see that the NFC division really is a pretty even division if we look at it. The Empire obviously has taken a late lead to this division after starting the season kind of rocky. And, we see some of our blue bloods of this league traditionally kind of struggling, but with the way the division is, they're still in the middle of the division. The Avengers, the Gila Monsters, teams that we think of constantly being great, really falling into that middle spot. So what will happen here? We don't quite know, but we do know that it's up for grabs. And then we take a look at the AFC, where the Chameleons seem to have a late lead here on the division, and really looking past where we have a middle ground that's quite tough. But overall, if we just look at these divisions, this hasn't been a dominant year. We have no teams that are sitting with one loss or no losses. I mean, we have the Chameleons with 2 losses, but other than that, everyone else in the league has at least 4 losses. And from top to bottom, our biggest division lead gaps are the Bunnies with 5 games, and we just haven't seen that in the league traditionally. So definitely an interesting league and a hard league to look at the playoff picture here. So let's take a look at the current playoff picture. If the playoffs were to happen today, here's what our playoffs would look like. Obviously, we have the division champs in the Cancun Chameleons and the division champs as the Empire Strikes Back, both getting their first round buys here. And then we see this bubble that we're going to talk about really show up. We have the Bangkok Ball and Bola sitting solidly with that 3 seed that will win above the Zestmeisters. And then the Zestmeisters sitting at that 4 seed with a 6-5 record. But then it's important to note here that we don't have a definitive 4 seed. We have a 3-way tie right now currently for that 4 seed position, with both the Avengers, the Gila Monsters, and the Rocky Rivers all sitting at that 5 and 6 mark. Currently, with the way the playoffs would work and the current tiebreakers, we would have the Avengers sneaking at that 5 seed, and then the Gila Monsters sit at that 6 seed. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of happens with this. And to be honest, I'm predicting a lot of changes in this playoff bracket. I think that this playoff bracket, this way you see it today, will not be the same playoff bracket you see at the end of the season or the regular season when the playoffs end. So, with that being said, let's start early. Let's look at the teams who have clinched. And if you looked at the division standings, you can see the Cancun Chameleons have, in fact, already clinched a spot in the playoffs. They have not quite clinched the division yet, but they are guaranteed a 100% spot in this year's fantasy playoffs. And then on the unfortunate side, let's look at the teams that are already eliminated. None, which is amazing to say the least. We have no teams eliminated with 3 weeks left in the season. Let that think, let that, you know, let that marinate for a moment. We have no teams that don't have a chance of making the playoffs, and we have one team clinched. If that doesn't tell you the variability of this playoff picture, then I don't know what will. To be honest, trying to run these simulations and get you a picture of the playoffs is bananas right now. One team is guaranteed a playoff spot, and no teams are not guaranteed a playoff spot. That means there's 5 playoff spots still up to for grabs for 9 teams. That's insane. So let's start first with the AFC division race. As far as the AFC division goes, we have 2 teams who are already not in contention for the AFC title. The Brooklyn Bunnies and Rocky River Rough Riders both do not have a shot at the AFC title. However, with the remaining 3 teams, the Chameleons, the Ballin' Bulls, and the Zestmeisters, we do have a championship picture starting to form. Cancun can clinch the division title this week with a win and a Ballin' Bulls loss. No matter what, that would clinch them the title, and they are in. If either of those occur, so if one happens and the other doesn't, the Cancun Chameleons would control their destiny for the next 2 weeks, where any win would clinch the division. And if we look at the odds here, Cancun has an 84% chance to win this division. So they're in a really good spot. I personally think Cancun will clinch this division. I think your AFC champions for 2025 are going to be the Cancun Chameleons. And the Ballin' Bulls, I think they have a shot, but was sitting at 16%. They need a lot of things to go right. But that's not to say the Zestmeisters, who need even more to go right, are out of it yet, technically. I mean, they have a 0.8% chance to win the division still, based on my simulations I ran and all of the criteria I ran through. So, in order for them to do that, they would need to win out. Cancun would have to lose out, and the Ballin' Bulls would have to not only win over Cancun and the Flying Squirrels, so the Zestmeisters would have to win their remaining matchup with the Ballin' Bulls. And with that, you end up in a 3-way complex tiebreaker in which it'll be interesting to see, to be quite honest. It's too hard to predict right now when we get into these multiple team tiebreakers. We look at our head-to-head records, and then we look at the head-to-head records between all 3 teams, and then we go to points for, and there's still a lot of points left to be grabbed for these teams with the 3 weeks left. But kind of looking at the point totals here, you do have a pretty significant lead with the Chameleons currently sitting at 65 points, and then the Ballin' Bulls sitting at 1588, meaning that the Ballin' Bulls would, in chance, have to outscore the Chameleons by over 200 in the next 3 weeks, and you would have to talk about having the Zestmeisters catch up from a 1487 deficit. So that's why they only have a 0.8% chance, and it's really, really tough. But with that being said, let's now look at the NFC division race. We see here that the Empire is currently sitting atop of the division, with the Avengers and Gila Monsters seeming like they might be in position, along with the Flying Squirrels. So, teams not in contention for the title. Lyndon Crow, I'm sorry, but there's no way in which you can make the lead up on the Empire and that they to win the division. So, looking at the championship contention and the championship race, Empire this week will win the division if they win and the Avengers lose. That being said, if the Empire wins, they can do no worse than tie for the division title. So if you're the Empire, you're really counting on that win this week. With that win, you guarantee that you are at least going to come down to a tiebreaker to win that division. They have an 80% chance to win the division, so a little less than the Chameleons, but they're definitely favored to win this division by a pretty heavy margin. If we look at the division standings, it's actually interesting because the Gila Monsters have a higher chance to still win the division than the Avengers do, despite sitting below the Avengers right now. So the Gila Monsters, they would have to win out for a chance to tie for the division. And they could end up in a pretty complex tiebreaker rule here, depending on how the other teams play out, and it would require only one Empire win. The Avengers also have to win out for a chance to win, a chance to tie for the division and win the tiebreaker rule. And they also can only need one Empire win. So if the Empire wins this week, that means the Empire has to lose out the rest of the season for either the Gila Monsters or Avengers to have a chance. And if you're the Flying Squirrels, you have a 2% chance, but it's really not possible. I mean, you require a win out, you require the Empire to lose out, the Avengers to lose, the Gila Monsters to lose, and then you have to win a horrible tiebreaker set in order to have a chance to win that title. So really here, I think the Empire's gonna take the NFC division, and I think the Empire Strikes Back kind of returns to dominant form and gets another division title to add to their belt. So let's now look at the wild card race, and boy, what a wild card race it is. To be quite honest, I this is insane. Um, Wild card race is something else. So let's start with the win in clinch scenarios. So with a win this week, these teams will clinch themselves 100% a playoff spot. And for that, it's the Ball and Balls and Empire Strikes Back. Both of these teams, if they win this week, they are guaranteed a playoff spot. But now let's look at the lose and done scenarios. So these teams are requiring a win this week. If they want any playoff hopes left, they have to win this week or else they are done. And that's Linden the Crow. Linden the Crow, unfortunately, you do have to win this week or else you are eliminated from playoff contention. You know, that puts a lot of stress on a team. We'll see how they react this week. So, but now let's turn our eyes to the bubble, which our bubble is downright massive. I am taking teams 4 through 9 currently within uh the league rankings as the bubble teams currently. Between all of these teams, all 6 teams, 2 games separate them. And with 3 games left in the season, that means that we can see insane playoff implications here. Currently, as you saw earlier, we have the Zestmeisters sitting at 4, Avengers at 5, Gila Monsters at 6, and the Rocky River Rough Riders at 7. And then in the 8-9 position, you also have a tie between the 4 and 7 Flying Squirrels and the 4 and 7 Bunnies. But it's crazy. So let's look at some of the takeaways. First of all, this is a crazy amount of teams left to be on the bubble, in the bubble, out of the bubble for 3 weeks left in the season. And with this big of a bubble, it's really hard to give definitive clear paths for teams to clinch. I mean, you could look and say, yes, if any of these teams outright win the season out, gives them a very, very good chance of winning the division. But the reality is that these teams aren't going to win out. These teams are playing each other. These teams have shown that they are, teams that can win and lose. So it's very definitive. There's no really clear like, hey, if you do this, you'll clinch a spot in the playoffs 100% for these teams. So it ends up really thing. And what this points to is that most likely we're going to end in a tiebreak matrix for the final wildcard spots. I think that your 5 and 6 wildcard spots are, and even potentially the 4, are going to be set on tiebreakers. I think your head-to-head record and your points for are really going to play a role here, and it'll be interesting to see how those kind of play out this year. So it's going to be interesting, and for these teams on the bubble, all of these weeks matter. The amount of points you bring in matters, and it's going to be interesting. So let's start with the current scenarios for at least a playoff tie. So with these scenarios, these teams are guaranteed to at least garner themselves a tie for a position and allow it to come down to a tie. For the Empire, with a Rough Riders loss and either a Flying Squirrels or Zestmeisters loss, you guarantee yourself a playoff tie position. But for the Empire, you're really looking for that division title. I don't think you're looking for these scenarios to happen so you can guarantee yourself a playoff tie. I think you are looking to secure that division, guarantee yourself the 1 or 2 seed, and really kind of, take a look. And honestly, if you're looking for that 1 seed, it's going to be tough. It looks like Cancun is probably going to walk away with the 1 seed here, but you're still in contention for it. So you're looking for that 1 or 2 seed right now. You're looking for that division title to lock yourself in the playoffs confidently with the top seed and a bye to the second round. For the Zestmeisters, it's a win and a Rough Riders or Avengers loss. With one of these, you have the Zestmeisters at least tying for a playoff spot and their first chance at making the playoffs, which would be huge for the Zestmeisters. For the Ball and Bolus, a Rough Riders loss or a Gila Monsters, Bunnies, and Avengers loss week would mean that they are at least tied for a playoff position. You're guaranteeing yourself that good chance. And honestly, I think if you're the Ball and Bolas, you're not too worried here. I think the Ball and Bolas are very much set. Like I said earlier, if they win, they're in. So I think that you are not worried too much about watching the losses of these teams, but you're more worried about trying to get that win this week. So let's look at the bubble playoff chances. Simple as that. Your chances based on multiple simulations, multiple different algorithms being ran. Here are the outright clinch, not ending in a tie. You guarantee yourself a playoff spot. For the Rough Riders, you have a 43% chance of outright clinching. If you're the Bunnies, it's only an 11% chance. For the Flying Squirrels, you have a 12%. For the Gila Monsters, you have a 49% chance of clinching yourself a playoff spot. For the Empire, you have a 96% chance. Like I said earlier, the Empire is in a great driving seat right now. They really do control their own destiny. Do note that the Chameleons are not on here because they have already clinched themselves that spot, and now they're really just kind of seeking that one seed and making sure they lock up the division title. If you're the Crow, there's no path in which the Crow can actually outright clinch themselves a spot. So if you're the Crow, you're really hoping for a lot of chaos to kind of happen and ending up in one of those ties right now. Zestmeisters, you have an 81% chance to outright clinch a spot, and the Ball and Boas are in the best spot right now with a 96% chance to clinch themselves a playoff spot. So then we look at the chances to end up in a tie that would not be resolved currently. So this is ties that would end up with weird head-to-head records and potentially go on to second and third criteria and points for and all that. If you're the Rough Riders, you have a 23% chance to end up in one of those ties. Bunnies the 22%, Flying Squirrel 16, Gila Monsters 22, Avengers 20, Empire 3, Crow 7, Zestmeyers 13, and Ball and Boas 2. So what this really shows with all these 20% and 10 to percent chances is that this league is super hard to predict. And like I said earlier, we're really looking at the potential for one of those ties to kind of decide who gets in at the end of the season, who doesn't get into the season. So there's a lot to look at there, and it'll be interesting to see kind of what happens. So we're really gonna hope that we see something good here, and you know, these are the chances based on algorithms and simulations being ran. So it'll be interesting to see. So finally, let's look at my predictions. Okay. My predictions, like I said, with the uncertainty of this league and everything like that, the honestly, the chances of it are downright hard to predict. Um, there's really no definitive. These are just my speculations looking at schedules that are left, positions currently, and stuff like that. And what I'm gonna predict is quite a shakeup. Just to start, because these won't appear here, I do predict that the Chameleons and Empire will both be the winners of their respective divisions, and I'll even go as far as to say I think Cancun locks up that one seed. I think Cancun is the team with the target on their back when it comes to the end of the year, as the one seed. So, with that being said, I now will be predicting our final bubble spots. So, first two wildcard spots in. I think the Ball and Bowl and Avengers lock up those 3-4 seeds. Looking at the records left, I think they're both in driver's seat positions. Looking at schedule left, I think those are the teams that you are going to see get that 3 and 4 seeds. Let's look now to the bottom two finish. Unfortunately, I do see Lyndon the Crow and the Flying Squirrels finishing as your last two teams in the league this year. Both of them have hard remaining schedules. They're not really in great driver's seats, concerned with their own destiny. So I think these are the last two teams you look at. And with those teams out, that leaves 4. So we have 2 playoff spots left and 2 teams that are just barely going to miss out on the playoffs. And this is the hardest one to predict, to be quite honest. But looking at trends, looking at schedules, looking at their chances and everything like that, I'm actually going to disagree a little bit with the simulations here. And your last 2 teams making the playoffs, and your first two teams out are the Rough Riders and Zestmeisters sneaking in to get those last two wildcard spots, and your first two teams out after hard-fought seasons and both teams trying to make a comeback are the Gila Monsters and Bunnies. Now let me tell you about this a little bit. The Zestmeisters currently are in a good position. They really do control their own destiny, and I think they can make their first playoff. They don't have a crazy schedule. It's not easy by any means, but I think they can make that spot. Rough Riders, you're looking at an easier schedule coming up. The schedule coming up, you're looking at teams, two of the three teams have a losing record currently. I think they can kind of cement themselves into one of those last two wildcard spots. And then first two out, Gila Monsters and Bunnies. Gila Monsters currently sitting inside the playoffs, have a tough schedule. Roster's taken some hits recently. Doesn't look good for them. Same with the Bunnies. They don't really control their destiny to the same extent some of these other teams do. They're currently sitting in ninth in the division. I think they'll make some jumps in the standings, but really, I just don't think they end up making it at the end of the year. I think they end up just short and one of those first two out of the bubble cup. So yeah, that's my playoff prediction. Like I said, these bubbles are so hard to predict, and there's really no path for any of these teams. So, week 12 is going to be an important week. I think we'll have a lot better and clear picture based on this week of the playoffs next week, but it's too hard to tell right now, and these are what the stats and the simulations and my personal opinions are reading. So, with that being said, this has been the Nathan Fantasy Football Updates and League playoff picture presented by yours truly, Jacob Gregg.
Man, some awesome stuff there from fellow Commissioner Greg. Love the entire breakdown. Super helpful for everybody to kind of get an idea of what needs to go right, what needs to go wrong for certain teams. And I've got to agree, absolute madness that we are going to have 6 teams most likely in the race for those final 3 spots. And I've got to also agree with, I see a lot of shifting going on. When we look at my schedule breakdown, the remaining schedule, I usually like to identify our toughest teams who will have kind of just that final 3-game stretch that's going to be extremely tough for them. And the 3 teams I have identified to have that toughest end of the year schedule when it matters the most to them, we start with our number 3 spot. That's going to go to the Guantanamo Bay Flying Squirrels. They've got the Michigan Avengers, the Empire Strikes Back, and then the Ball and Boas. All 3 teams that are in the race, 2 teams that are at the top of the race. It's an uphill climb, and they're going to have to find some upset victories. They've got a good squad that I think can do it, but it's going to take an uphill climb for them as well. So they slide in at 3 because they have to win. It's not like they can drop and afford to drop 1 or 2 of those. They have to put together at least 2 of the 3, if not all 3 of them in a row, if they want a playoff chance. My number 2 team coming in with the next hardest schedule, it's the Zestmeisters. This week they get the Ball and Boas. Next week the Rocky River Rough Riders, and then the Empire. All teams dead set in the thick of the race. Again, the Ball and Boas, Empire leading that race. The Rough Riders, you need to get that series head-to-head victory. Just a tough run for the Zestmeisters. No Amon-Ra St. Brown, and still they're going to have to try to run this gauntlet. It's going to be interesting. They've got to find, again, they're 1 win away from that 7 mark, so you feel good about their chances probably to find their way in for their first playoff appearance. But you've got to find at least 1 win to hit that 7 mark, where it's not as comfortable as it was last year, but you need 7 wins at least to at least have a sense of comfortability and know you've got some head-to-head tiebreakers. So out of those 3 games, you got to find 1 win at least, but 2 wins, you pretty much lock yourself into the playoffs if you're the Zestmeisters. And then the hardest remaining schedule, it's got to go to the Gila Monsters. It is a gauntlet. You've won 5 straight before this, 5 out of your last 6. You lose the last one to the Avengers, and screw yourself on a tiebreaker there, because now the Avengers have won both games of the series. You guys are tied at 5 and 6, but they would get in over you if there were some craziness. So you've got to keep that in mind. You start out with the team trying to clinch the NFC and the Empire. Then you get the Bunnies, who right now are still in the race. So and they've got arguably one of the better rosters in the league. You'll have to face that next week, and then you end with the Cancun Chameleons. Just brutal stuff. The Cancun Chameleons 9-2. At that point, they honestly could be 11-2, going for the best record all time. That's just a gauntlet to try to go through. So if you're the Gila Monsters, you've got to look at those first two games and go, listen, it's honestly got to be 2-0. You've got to win against the Bunnies and the Empire and then figure out the Chameleons. Because if you drop one of those, then it is, we've got to upset the best team in the league, who will probably be the number one seed in the playoffs. So tough road ahead for those three squads. However, we are going to take a look at my predictions. We saw Commissioner Greg's predictions. It's time to see my predictions. I've got a lot kind of shaping up the entire playoffs. It's going to be interesting, and I've got a couple tiebreakers involved. That's for sure. So let's see my playoff bracket. Here it is. My 1 seed, the Cancun Chameleons. I just have to agree there. They are winning their division, and the Empire find a way to win their division. Maybe not this week, but next week probably. So those are my 2 division winners. They'll get a first-round bye. Moving forward in this process, I think the Ball and Boas take care of business. They are the second best record coming into the playoffs, but because the NFC gets an automatic bye, they'll be the 3 seed in this year's tournament, pretty well set up there on their side of the division. And they will take on, yes, the 4 seed. Well, they won't take on, but we'll see the 4-seeded Rocky River Rough Riders up top there on the other side of the bracket. They've got a tough schedule. They take on the Bunnies, the Zestmeisters, and Linden the Crow. I take that back. It's super easy outside of the Bunnies and really the Zestmeisters. Linden the Crow, that's a big one that you feel comfortable getting. I think they do pretty well. They find themselves even out of that playoff tiebreaker discussion. They get a couple 2 to 3 wins in that span, find themselves up top as the 4 seed. And out of nowhere, the Rough Riders are representing the AFC. That's 3 teams from the AFC in. They would take on the 5-seeded Gila Monsters, their rival. That's right. I've got the Gila Monsters making it out of that gauntlet schedule. I've got them sliding into the playoffs to try to defend their title. And how about a rivalry game in the first round of the playoffs? I think that would be pretty awesome. So give me the Rough Riders and Gila Monsters to match up. Winner would play the Chameleons, but nonetheless, pretty awesome meeting there. And then you guys see it, my 6th seed, the team that gets in, the Zestmeisters, will make their first playoff appearance. They have set themselves up to head into a tough final 3 games, needing just 1 win, it feels like. They've got 6 wins already. 1 win, maybe 2 wins in that span locks you into the playoffs. I feel good about the Zestmeisters' chances. And I've actually got them, though, in a tiebreaker scenario with the Avengers and the Flying Squirrels. In that head-to-head matchup, they get in over the pair. Now, if the Avengers and Flying Squirrels, if the Avengers win that matchup, we don't go to head-to-head in this scenario. And the Zestmeisters, it would have to go to points 4 then, because that 3-team tie. Zestmeisters have the tiebreaker over the Avengers and the Flying Squirrels. But if the Avengers found a way to get a win against the Zestmeisters, or rather the Flying Squirrels, that could jumble everything up right now, and it would not be the Zestmeisters getting in because of that not same linearity. So, Zestmeisters get in this scenario, but there are other scenarios that could play out where the Avengers or the Flying Squirrels, the Bunnies have a chance. This could be a lot of different teams. Maybe we find the Rough Riders or Gila Monsters in this spot, but right now I'm going Zestmeisters get into the playoffs for the first time. Boy, oh boy, craziness. This is an awesome fantasy run. This is going to be a fantastic finish. So tune in to these final 3 weeks. This is going to be a thriller. Those were my playoff predictions. Those were the playoff breakdown from Commissioner Greg. Great stuff over there. Don't know if I agree with the Gila Monsters being the first team out, but you know, that might be just my bias. Anyways, that'll do it for this week's playoff prediction breakdown. We will be back next week for some talk on how this week shaped up. We'll break down those final 2 weeks, let you know some more playoff implications. So stay tuned, stay with us. Let us know in the comments below, what is your playoff prediction? What 6 teams do you see getting into the tournament? Let us know in the comments below. We'll be right back and see you shortly here on the Nathan Sports Talks channel.